Welcome to Hard Work Keeps You Poor. The truth nobody accepts. In this audiobook, you're going to uncover the uncomfortable reality most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You're going to understand why millions of disciplined, hard-working people remain financially trapped, while others who appear calmer, slower, and more strategic quietly build freedom behind the scenes. This is not about laziness. This is not about shortcuts. And this is definitely not financial advice. This is about awareness, because there is a massive difference between working hard and building leverage. There is a massive difference between being productive and being valuable. And there is a massive difference between being busy and becoming free. Over the next chapters, we will break down the psychology of modern work culture, the addiction to busyness, the illusion of hustle, emotional exhaustion, digital distraction, invisible dependency, silent wealth, strategic thinking, emotional discipline, time ownership, and the hidden habits that separate workers from builders. You will hear stories from warehouse workers, founders, nurses, immigrants, coders, drivers, creators, single parents, burned-out executives, and people who discovered too late that they had traded their entire life for survival. Because the world has changed. In 2025, people are working from laptops on beaches, while others work 3 jobs and still cannot breathe financially. Artificial intelligence replaced entire departments. Attention became currency. Algorithms became employers. And somewhere in the middle of all this noise, millions of people kept following rules designed for a world that no longer exists. Here is the sentence that may change your life forever. If hard work alone created wealth, every exhausted person would already be rich. Read that again in your mind. Feel it, because most people do not want truth. They want reassurance. They want to believe that if they simply suffer long enough, freedom will arrive automatically. But suffering is not strategy, and motion is not progress. If this audiobook hits you deeply at any point, leave a comment with the line that struck hardest. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. Sometimes, writing one honest sentence becomes the beginning of a new identity. Now, take a breath, because Chapter 1 begins with a question almost nobody dares to ask. What if the system never wanted you free? Chapter 1. The Reward Trap. From the time you were a child, you were trained to obey a pattern. Wake up early, follow instructions, work hard, stay busy, be realistic, do not question authority, do not take risks, and maybe, someday, after 40 years of labor, you might finally rest. That script sounds normal, because repetition made it invisible. But invisible things are often the most dangerous. Think about school for a moment. Most children were never taught how money works, never taught emotional intelligence, never taught negotiation, never taught ownership, never taught leverage, never taught attention economics, never taught how to think independently under pressure. But they were taught how to sit still for 8 hours, how to ask permission to speak, how to memorize information they would forget, how to compete for approval, how to fear mistakes, and how to associate obedience with safety. The system did not create creators. It created dependable workers. And there is a reason for that. An economy built on consumption needs exhausted people. Exhausted people buy convenience. Exhausted people stop questioning. Exhausted people accept survival. Exhausted people trade freedom for certainty. That is why so many people secretly feel trapped even when they are doing everything right. They followed the map exactly, yet somehow the destination still feels empty. A man wakes up at 5 a.m. every day in London, commutes 90 minutes, works 10 hours, eats lunch staring at emails, comes home numb, scrolls until midnight, sleeps, repeats. A woman in Toronto works remotely from her apartment. Her laptop never closes. Slack notifications follow her into dinner. Her nervous system never rests. She earns more money than ever before, yet feels less alive every year. A delivery driver in Sao Paulo works 14 hours daily. He tells himself it is temporary. 5 years pass, nothing changes except the exhaustion in his eyes. Hard workers, good people, disciplined people, still trapped. Why? Because effort without ownership creates dependency. That is the sentence nobody teaches. Effort without ownership creates dependency. You can work yourself to the bone building somebody else's dream while your own future quietly disappears in the background. And the terrifying part is this. The world praises you for it. People clap for burnout. They celebrate overwork. They glorify sleep deprivation. They romanticize struggle. I'm grinding. I'll sleep when I'm dead. No days off. Listen carefully. A machine also works nonstop until it breaks. That is not inspiration. That is programming. Somewhere along the line, people confused self-destruction with ambition. But real wealth is not measured by how exhausted you are. Real wealth is measured by how much control you have over your time, your mind, your health, your location, your relationships, and your peace. A person earning less money with freedom may secretly be wealthier than someone making 6 figures with no life left inside them. But society rarely says that out loud, because appearances have become more important than truth. People rent luxury to hide anxiety. They post success while privately drowning. They smile in photographs while silently medicating stress. And every day, the cycle continues. Work, consume, escape, repeat. Work, consume, escape, repeat. Until one morning, a person wakes up and realizes they spent 20 years surviving without ever actually living. That realization hurts. But it also awakens something powerful, awareness. Because once you see the trap, you cannot unsee it. And that is where transformation begins. Not with motivation, not with hype, with awareness. A quiet realization that says, I cannot spend my entire life trading time for survival. The internet changed everything. For the first time in history, a teenager with a phone can build influence faster than corporations built it 20 years ago. One person with leverage can outperform 100 exhausted workers. One smart system can generate more income than 10 years of physical labor. One piece of content can travel globally while its creator sleeps. The rules changed, but most people are still psychologically living in 1995, still believing presence equals productivity, still believing suffering automatically creates success, still believing freedom must wait until retirement. No, freedom is built intentionally, or it is never built at all. And here is where people misunderstand this message. This audiobook is not telling you to stop working hard. It is telling you to stop working hard blindly. Because blind effort is one of the fastest ways to waste a life. The worker says, how many hours must I work? The builder asks, how can this work without me? The worker trades time. The builder creates systems. The worker survives month to month. The builder thinks decade to decade. The worker burns energy. The builder multiplies energy. One remains trapped. One slowly becomes free. And the shift between those identities begins in silence. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly. A new question forms in your mind. What am I actually building? Not earning, building. Because if your labor disappears the moment you stop moving, you do not own freedom yet. And deep down, you already know this. That discomfort you feel sometimes at night, that anxiety before Monday, that exhaustion even after resting, it is not weakness. It is your soul recognizing misalignment. The human spirit was not designed only to survive schedules. It was designed to create, to expand, to think, to imagine, to live. And in Chapter 2, we are going to uncover the addiction that keeps intelligent people trapped longer than poverty itself. The addiction to being busy. Because some people are not addicted to progress. They are addicted to distraction disguised as productivity. And that realization changes everything. Dear friends, we've just started working on this channel, so we'd really appreciate your support. Please like the video and leave a few words in the comments. It'll really help us promote it. We'd be very grateful. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. The addiction to being busy. There are people who have not sat alone with their own thoughts in years, not because they are incapable of silence, but because silence forces truth to speak. So they stay busy, always moving, always checking notifications, always answering messages, always multitasking, always exhausted. Modern society rewards visible activity so aggressively that many people no longer know the difference between movement and progress. And that confusion is costing them their lives. A man wakes up and immediately grabs his phone. Emails, news, messages, stock updates, social media, artificial urgency before his feet even touch the floor. His nervous system never gets a moment of stillness. Then he says he is productive. No, he is overstimulated. There is a difference. The modern world profits from fractured attention. Every platform competes for your focus. Every application is engineered to keep you reactive. Every algorithm studies your impulses more carefully than most people study their own future, and the more distracted you become, the easier you are to control. Because distracted people do not build, they consume. Look carefully at the average day. How many hours disappear into things that leave no lasting value? Scrolling, complaining, watching strangers live, arguing online, refreshing feeds, consuming outrage, escaping discomfort. People say they are tired because they work too much. Sometimes they are tired because their attention is constantly bleeding energy. Mental exhaustion is not always caused by effort. Sometimes it is caused by fragmentation. Too many tabs open, too many voices speaking, too many comparisons, too many directions, too much noise. A distracted mind cannot build wealth, because wealth requires depth, and depth requires focus. This is why some people work fewer hours, yet create exponentially larger results. They protect their attention like survival depends on it. Because it does. Attention is the new oil, the new currency, the new battlefield, and most people give it away for free every morning before breakfast. Think about how dangerous that is. Your focus determines your future. Whatever consistently controls your attention eventually controls your life. That is why poor thinking patterns repeat across generations. Not because people are incapable, but because they never have enough silence to think independently. A person works all day, escapes all night, repeats forever. No reflection, no strategy, no self-awareness, no intentional redesign of life, just motion. That is why years pass quickly for so many adults. Nothing is changing internally, and external repetition creates psychological numbness. People begin surviving automatically. Wake up, work, eat, scroll, sleep, wake up, work, eat, scroll, sleep. 1 week becomes 1 year. 1 year becomes 10. Then suddenly, someone is 45 years old wondering where their life went. Not because they were lazy, because they were unconscious. There is a sentence most people avoid because it feels too uncomfortable. You can be hardworking and still be deeply distracted. That sentence matters because distraction does not always look lazy. Sometimes distraction wears a suit. Sometimes it answers emails at midnight. Sometimes it looks ambitious. But internally, it is still avoidance. Avoidance of fear, avoidance of stillness, avoidance of difficult decisions, avoidance of confronting a painful truth. This path is draining my life. Some people stay busy because busyness protects them from confronting emptiness. If they slow down, they might realize they built a life they do not even want. That realization terrifies people, so they speed up instead. But speed without direction only creates faster suffering. A young man in Mumbai spends 12 hours daily networking online, podcasts, courses, threads, videos, motivation, business content. He feels productive, yet he never actually builds anything, no skill mastered, no system created, no action sustained, only consumption. Another woman in New York says she has no time to pursue her dream, but her weekly screen report says 7 hours daily on entertainment platforms. Not evil, not weak, just unconscious. Because modern distraction does not feel dangerous. It feels normal. And what feels normal rarely gets questioned. Here is the brutal truth. Most people are not overworked. They are under-focused. 1 hour of clear, uninterrupted focus can outperform 10 hours of fragmented effort. That is why some people quietly transform their lives while others stay trapped despite trying hard. Focus compounds. Scattered energy disappears, and the modern world is designed to scatter you. Notifications interrupt thought. Advertisements trigger insecurity. Platforms monetize comparison. News monetizes fear, and fear destroys clear thinking. A fearful mind cannot think long-term. It becomes reactive, emotional, impulsive. Exactly what modern systems benefit from, because reactive people buy relief. Think about consumer culture carefully. Stress increases spending. Insecurity increases consumption. Emotional exhaustion increases dependency. That is why exhausted people often buy things they do not need. Tiny dopamine hits become emotional survival. Fast food, impulse shopping, streaming binges, luxury branding, status signaling, temporary relief. But temporary relief never creates freedom. Only awareness does. That is why wealthy thinking often begins with subtraction instead of addition. Less noise, less distraction, less emotional chaos, less performance, less unnecessary stimulation. The strongest minds are usually calmer than the loudest minds, and calmness is becoming rare. People cannot sit in silence for 5 minutes without reaching for stimulation. That should concern you, because if solitude feels unbearable, your inner world may already be overcrowded. The richest ideas in human history were born in silence, not during scrolling, not during comparison. Silence sharpens thought. That is why many successful people intentionally protect mornings, protect focus, protect peace, protect deep work. Because every interruption has a hidden cost. A distracted hour steals more than time. It steals momentum. And momentum is everything. Once a person builds focused momentum consistently, life starts changing rapidly. Skills compound. Confidence grows, clarity increases, opportunities expand. Not because of magic, because energy finally moves in one direction. Most people never experience this. Their attention leaks everywhere. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with holes in the bottom. That is modern life for many people. Constant input, minimal internal processing, and eventually the nervous system collapses under invisible pressure. Anxiety rises, patience disappears, sleep weakens, attention span shrinks, purpose fades. Then people wonder why they feel lost. But lost people are often simply overstimulated people, and overstimulation creates emotional fog. This is why strategic solitude matters. You must hear your own thoughts again, not the algorithm's thoughts, not influencer opinions, not fear-driven media narratives. Yours. Because beneath all the noise, your deeper instincts already know what is misaligned. You already know which habits are draining you, which relationships weaken you, which distractions numb you, which patterns keep repeating. But awareness requires stillness, and stillness has become revolutionary. A quiet room now feels more uncomfortable to many people than physical labor. Think about that carefully. A generation capable of accessing infinite information, yet terrified of being alone with itself. That is not an accident. A distracted population is easier to manipulate because clear thinkers become dangerous. A clear thinker questions systems, questions habits, questions dependency, questions why exhaustion has become normalized. And once a person starts asking real questions, their entire identity begins changing. That is the beginning of freedom. Not money first, awareness first. Because freedom starts psychologically before it appears financially. A calm, focused mind sees opportunities that emotional minds completely miss. While most people react emotionally, builders observe strategically. That difference changes entire futures. The exhausted worker says, "I need a vacation." The aware builder asks, "Why have I created a life I constantly need escape from?" One seeks temporary relief. The other seeks permanent redesign. Completely different psychology. And psychology shapes destiny more than effort ever will. This is why some people remain trapped even after earning more money. Their internal operating system never changed. More income with the same emotional patterns only creates more expensive chaos. Real wealth requires emotional discipline. The ability to stay calm when others panic, focused when others scatter, patient when others rush, intentional when others react. And emotional discipline cannot exist without awareness. This is why silence matters. Silence reveals patterns. The moment distractions disappear, truth becomes louder. You notice your exhaustion, your resentment, your misalignment, your wasted years, your hidden fear, your unlived potential, painful but necessary. Because denial keeps people poor longer than a lack of opportunity. And the modern world offers endless distractions specifically to help people avoid confronting themselves. But eventually, everyone reaches a moment where distraction stops working. A moment late at night. A moment driving home exhausted. A moment staring at a ceiling unable to sleep. And a quiet question appears. Is this really my life? That question changes everything, because once the mind starts waking up, it becomes impossible to fully return to unconscious living. And in Chapter 3, we are going to uncover why intelligent people often stay financially trapped longer than everyone else, because knowledge alone does not create freedom. In fact, sometimes intelligence becomes the very prison keeping people stuck. Chapter 3. the intelligent prison. Some of the smartest people in the world are trapped in lives they secretly hate, not because they lack intelligence, because they mistake intelligence for freedom. There is a dangerous illusion that education automatically creates security, that if a person collects enough degrees, enough certifications, enough credentials, life will eventually reward them with peace. But look around carefully. Millions of highly educated people are emotionally exhausted, financially dependent, deeply anxious, and terrified to stop working for even a few months. Why? Because information is not leverage, and modern society quietly trained people to confuse the two. A person can know everything about economics and still drown in debt. A person can understand psychology and still sabotage relationships. A person can study business for 10 years and never build a single asset. Knowledge without execution becomes intellectual entertainment, and intellectual entertainment is one of the most seductive traps in modern life, especially for intelligent people, because smart people are extremely skilled at explaining why they are stuck. They analyze endlessly, overthink endlessly, research endlessly, prepare endlessly. But action, delayed. The intelligent mind often hides behind preparation because preparation feels safer than exposure. A person says, "I'm still learning. I need one more course. I'm waiting for the perfect moment. I need more certainty." Years pass, nothing changes, because intelligence can become armor against risk. And without risk, there is no transformation. Think about how many brilliant people remain invisible, extraordinary minds, powerful ideas, creative potential, buried beneath fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of instability. Meanwhile, less talented people sometimes build massive success simply because they move faster, not recklessly, but decisively. The world rewards executed value more than hidden potential. That sentence matters deeply. Executed value changes lives. Hidden potential only creates regret. A young engineer in Berlin spends every evening studying entrepreneurship videos. He understands branding, marketing, automation, artificial intelligence, market psychology, but he never launches anything. 5 years later, he is still planning. Another person with half the knowledge starts a simple online service, improves it consistently, learns through action, and eventually builds financial freedom. Who wins? Usually the person willing to move imperfectly, because modern life rewards adaptability more than theoretical perfection. The world is changing too quickly for overthinking. Artificial intelligence disrupted entire industries within months. Content creation replaced traditional gatekeepers. Remote work erased geographic limitations. Small creators built audiences larger than television networks. And still, millions remain frozen waiting for certainty. But certainty is an illusion. Nobody knows exactly what the future holds. Not corporations, not governments, not experts. The people who thrive are not necessarily the smartest. They are the most adaptable emotionally. That is the hidden advantage. Emotional flexibility. The ability to move despite uncertainty. Schools rarely teach this. Traditional systems reward correct answers. Modern reality rewards adaptive thinking. Completely different skill sets. This is why many high achievers secretly struggle when real life becomes unpredictable. They built identities around external validation, grades, titles, approval, performance reviews. Then adulthood arrives and nobody hands out emotional clarity. Now the game changes. The internet does not care about your diploma if you cannot create value. Markets do not reward effort emotionally. They reward usefulness practically. And usefulness evolves constantly. That realization hurts many people because they spent years climbing ladders that no longer lead where they hoped. A lawyer earning impressive money secretly fantasizes about escape every morning. A corporate executive feels physically sick before meetings. A medical professional burns out under endless pressure while society calls them successful. Outward success. Inner collapse. This is happening everywhere because people pursued status before alignment. And status is one of the most addictive drugs on earth. Humans desperately want to appear successful, even when internally they're breaking apart. That is why people stay in careers destroying their mental health. The paycheck becomes psychological handcuffs, golden handcuffs, comfortable suffering, predictable misery, and intelligent people rationalize it beautifully. We have responsibilities. It's too late to change. This is just adulthood. At least it's stable. But stability without fulfillment slowly destroys the spirit, not instantly, quietly. A little more numbness each year, a little less energy, a little less curiosity, a little less aliveness. Until eventually, a person no longer remembers who they were before survival consumed everything. That is the real tragedy. Not poverty, disconnection from self. Because money problems can be solved. But losing connection to your own spirit creates a different kind of emptiness, one that no salary can fully fix. There are people earning millions who still feel trapped emotionally. Why? Because external success cannot repair internal disconnection. A person who never learned peace will remain restless even inside luxury. A person who never learned emotional discipline will sabotage opportunities repeatedly. A person who depends entirely on external validation will never feel secure. That is why inner work matters, not as a trend, not as performance, as survival. Modern life attacks the nervous system constantly. Comparison, pressure, information overload, financial anxiety, performance culture. And intelligent people are often hit hardest because they can imagine every possible negative outcome. Their minds become prediction machines. Overthinking becomes chronic. But overthinking is rarely intelligence. Usually, it is fear wearing intellectual clothing. Read that again mentally. Fear wearing intellectual clothing. Some people are not careful. They are terrified. Terrified of embarrassment. Terrified of uncertainty. Terrified of losing identity. Terrified of failing publicly, so they remain in familiar suffering instead. Because familiar pain feels psychologically safer than unfamiliar possibility. This is why many people secretly stay poor emotionally, financially, and spiritually, despite enormous potential. Not because they cannot grow, because their nervous system became addicted to safety, and safety can quietly become a prison. Every major transformation in human history required uncertainty. Every meaningful leap demanded discomfort. No one builds freedom by remaining psychologically comfortable forever. Nobody. The entrepreneur risks stability, the artist risks criticism, the creator risks rejection, the leader risks misunderstanding. Growth demands exposure, but modern culture trained people to avoid discomfort at all costs. Instant entertainment, instant food, instant validation, instant dopamine. Humans are becoming less tolerant of delayed rewards, and delayed rewards are exactly where real wealth is built. Financial wealth, emotional wealth, spiritual wealth. physical health, strong relationships, all require long-term thinking. But the modern mind is being conditioned for short-term stimulation. That is why patience has become rare, and rare traits become valuable. A focused, patient person in 2025 has an almost unfair advantage because most people cannot stay committed long enough to compound results. They quit too early, change direction too often, need validation too quickly. The intelligent prison often sounds like this: what if it doesn't work? But there is another question intelligent people rarely ask themselves: what if staying the same costs me my entire life? That question changes perspective completely, because remaining trapped has a cost too. A massive cost. Lost years, lost health, lost potential, lost memories, lost peace. People fear taking risks, while ignoring the terrifying risk of never changing at all. Imagine reaching old age realizing you spent decades postponing your real life. That pain would be unbearable. And deep down, many people already feel hints of it now. Tiny flashes of regret, moments of emotional exhaustion, sudden envy when seeing someone living authentically. Not envy of money, envy of freedom. Freedom radiates differently. You can feel it in people. Calm energy, intentional living, presence, clarity. Not frantic, not desperate, not constantly performing. Real freedom slows the nervous system, and people starving for peace can sense it immediately. That is why this audiobook is not merely about money. It is about reclaiming your mind from unconscious conditioning, because hard work without awareness becomes self-destruction, and awareness without action becomes self-deception. You need both: clarity and courage, vision and movement, stillness and execution. That balance changes everything. A person who combines emotional discipline with strategic action becomes almost unstoppable over time. Not overnight, over time. Because compounding is the real superpower most people underestimate. Tiny daily choices become identities. Identities become lifestyles. Lifestyles become destinies. And most destinies are not dramatic decisions. They are repeated patterns, repeated distractions, repeated fears, repeated compromises, repeated avoidance, or repeated focus, repeated learning, repeated courage, repeated discipline. Every day quietly votes for the future version of you. The question is, who are you becoming through repetition? Because repetition is never neutral. And in Chapter 4, we are going to uncover one of the darkest modern addictions, silently destroying ambition, focus, and emotional strength across the world. Comfort, not rest, not peace. Comfort addiction. Because comfort, when uncontrolled, quietly steals human potential, one soft decision at a time. Dear viewer, we would really be grateful if you could share your ideas on how we can improve our videos in the comments. Thank you very much. Chapter 4. The Comfort Addiction. Comfort is dangerous because it rarely looks dangerous in the beginning. It looks harmless. One more hour in bed. One more episode. One more excuse. One more delay. One more distraction. One more year waiting for the right time. And slowly, almost invisibly, a human being begins trading their future for temporary emotional relief. That is how dreams disappear. Not always through failure, often through comfort. People imagine destruction as something dramatic. But most lives are not destroyed dramatically. They are softened into mediocrity. A little less discipline, a little less courage, a little less hunger, a little more convenience, a little more avoidance, until eventually the person who once had fire in their eyes start speaking only about survival. And the terrifying part? Society normalizes it. Modern systems are built around convenience. Food arrives instantly. Entertainment never ends. Algorithms predict desires before people consciously feel them. Artificial intelligence removes friction from effort. Comfort is now available 24 hours a day. But humans do not grow through constant comfort. They grow through resistance. Muscles grow through resistance. Character grows through resistance. Discipline grows through resistance. Wisdom grows through resistance. Without resistance, people weaken psychologically. That is exactly what is happening across the world right now. People are overstimulated, under-challenged, emotionally reactive, mentally distracted, and spiritually exhausted. Not because they are weak by nature, because they have been conditioned to avoid discomfort at all costs. And avoidance always has a hidden price. A man says he wants financial freedom, but avoids learning uncomfortable skills. A woman says she wants peace, but avoids difficult conversations. Someone wants transformation, but avoids discipline. The mind wants results. The nervous system wants comfort, and that internal conflict silently shapes entire lives. Comfort whispers seductive lies. You deserve a break. You can start tomorrow. Relax for now. You've already done enough. Meanwhile, months disappear, then years, and eventually people wake up shocked by consequences they created slowly, because consequences compound quietly at first, just like success does. This is why self-awareness matters so deeply. You must learn to recognize the difference between rest and avoidance. Rest restores power. Avoidance drains purpose. Completely different energies. One heals you, the other weakens you slowly. The problem is that avoidance feels good temporarily. That is why it becomes addictive. Every time a person escapes discomfort through distraction, the brain receives relief, and relief becomes reinforcement. That is how habits form. Not because something is good for you, because it temporarily protects you from emotional tension. This explains why intelligent people still procrastinate, why capable people sabotage themselves, why disciplined people suddenly collapse into old habits. The issue is rarely capability. The issue is emotional management, because success requires tolerating discomfort longer than most people are emotionally trained to tolerate it. Think about modern attention spans. People struggle to watch a 5-minute video without checking another screen. People feel anxious standing in lines without stimulation. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels threatening. That should concern you deeply, because a mind unable to tolerate discomfort becomes controllable, and controllable people rarely become free. Freedom requires emotional endurance, the ability to sit with uncertainty, sit with delayed gratification, sit with boredom, sit with discipline, sit with temporary invisibility while building something meaningful. Most people cannot handle that psychologically. They need immediate evidence, immediate likes, immediate money, immediate results, immediate recognition. But real transformation is usually invisible in the beginning. The gym changes nothing visibly for weeks. Learning a skill feels slow at first. Building a business often looks meaningless before momentum arrives. Healing emotionally can feel lonely before peace appears. This is why comfort addiction destroys so much potential. People quit during the invisible phase, the phase where foundations are quietly forming. A bamboo tree can spend years developing underground before suddenly rising rapidly. Human growth works similarly. The deepest transformations often happen internally before external results appear. But modern culture trained people to worship immediate outcomes, so they abandon the process too early. And then they call themselves failures. No, they simply underestimated the emotional endurance required for growth. Every meaningful life demands discomfort somewhere. The athlete feels physical discomfort. The entrepreneur feels uncertainty. The creator feels rejection. The leader feels pressure. The healer feels emotional confrontation. Nobody escapes discomfort completely. The only question is whether your discomfort creates growth or regret. That sentence matters because avoiding temporary discomfort often creates permanent suffering. A difficult workout prevents future illness. A difficult conversation prevents years of resentment. A difficult decision prevents decades of misalignment. Temporary discipline creates long-term peace. Meanwhile, comfort creates the opposite pattern. Temporary relief. Long-term pain. People avoid saving money because spending feels good now. Avoid fitness because rest feels easier now. Avoid learning because entertainment feels easier now. Avoid change because familiarity feels safer now. But eventually, reality collects the debt. Always. The body keeps score, the mind keeps score, time keeps score, and time is the one thing nobody can negotiate with. That is why intentional discomfort becomes powerful. Cold showers, deep focus, early mornings, hard conversations, learning new skills, saying no to distractions, protecting routines, building discipline quietly. These actions strengthen identity, not because suffering itself is noble, but because self-control creates freedom. A person unable to control impulses becomes emotionally dependent on external comfort, and emotional dependency is expensive. Financially, mentally, spiritually, look around carefully. Entire industries profit from human impulsiveness. Fast food profits from lack of discipline. Social media profits from lack of focus. Consumer culture profits from insecurity. Addictive entertainment profits from emotional avoidance. The modern economy often rewards your weakness more than your strength. That is why awareness matters so much, because unconscious habits create predictable lives. And predictable unconscious lives rarely lead to freedom. People think freedom is about doing whatever they want. No, that is often chaos. Real freedom is the ability to govern yourself intentionally, to choose discipline over impulse, clarity over distraction, long-term peace over short-term relief. That is real power, and power begins internally before it appears externally. A person with emotional control can survive uncertainty better than a person with unlimited motivation. Motivation fades constantly. Identity lasts longer. If someone identifies as disciplined, they continue when emotions fluctuate. If someone depends entirely on feelings, consistency disappears the moment discomfort arrives. That is why identity matters more than goals. Goals create direction. Identity creates behavior. A person trying to quit distractions struggles constantly. A person who deeply sees themselves as focused behaves differently automatically. Identity changes action at the root, and identity is shaped through repeated decisions. Every time you choose discipline, you strengthen a new self-image. Every time you choose avoidance, you reinforce the old one. That is why tiny choices matter so much. 1 hour wasted does not destroy a life instantly, but repeated for years, everything changes. Likewise, 1 hour invested intentionally may seem insignificant initially, but repeated daily for years, entire futures transform. Compounding works both ways. People understand compound interest financially, but few understand emotional compounding. Repeated stress compounds, repeated distraction compounds, repeated laziness compounds, repeated discipline compounds, repeated focus compounds. Eventually, your habits become your environment, and your environment shapes your emotional state daily. This is why some people feel trapped even inside success. Their external world improved, but their internal habits never evolved. They still seek comfort compulsively, still avoid stillness, still escape discomfort, still depend on stimulation. External upgrades cannot compensate for internal weakness forever. Eventually, the cracks appear. Burnout, anxiety, emptiness, addiction, emotional numbness, because humans were not designed merely to consume comfort endlessly. They were designed to grow, to challenge themselves, to evolve consciously, to become stronger mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Without growth, the soul becomes restless. That restlessness explains why many people feel unfulfilled even after achieving goals they once desperately wanted. The goal was never the real issue. Misalignment was. A person disconnected from purpose can never consume enough comfort to fill the emptiness. Never. That is why some wealthy people still feel miserable, and some disciplined builders with modest beginnings radiate deep peace. Inner alignment changes everything, and alignment often requires painful honesty. Honesty about distractions, honesty about excuses, honesty about patterns, honesty about emotional dependence on comfort. But honesty creates freedom. Denial creates stagnation. The moment a person fully confronts their patterns, change finally becomes possible. And in Chapter 5, we are going to uncover why modern people are more exhausted than previous generations despite having more convenience, more technology, and more comfort than ever before. Because exhaustion today is no longer just physical. It is psychological warfare against attention, identity, and peace. And most people do not even realize they are fighting it. If you like this audiobook, please give it a like. It will really help us promote the video Chapter 5, The Invisible Exhaustion. There was a time when exhaustion mostly came from physical labor. Factories, fields, construction sites, long hours using the body until muscles collapsed into sleep. But modern exhaustion is different. Now people can sit in air-conditioned rooms all day and still feel completely destroyed inside. Why? Because mental exhaustion has surpassed physical exhaustion. And most people are carrying invisible psychological weight they were never trained to manage. Constant comparison, constant stimulation, constant uncertainty, constant pressure to perform, constant information, constant exposure to negativity. The nervous system never fully rests anymore. That is why people wake up tired even after sleeping. The body may pause, but the mind never stops running. A woman lies in bed at midnight scrolling through success videos while quietly feeling like she is falling behind in life. A teenager compares himself to millionaire influencers before even understanding who he is. A father works all day, but mentally remains trapped inside financial anxiety every hour afterward. A business owner checks notifications during dinner because silence now feels unfamiliar. This is not normal human living. This is chronic nervous system overload. And overloaded people cannot think clearly. They react emotionally, spend impulsively, lose focus quickly, seek comfort constantly, struggle to stay present. Exactly what modern systems benefit from. Because exhausted minds are easier to influence. Think carefully about this. When a human being is mentally drained, they stop asking deeper questions. They just want relief. That is why exhaustion has become one of the most profitable emotional states in the modern economy. Exhausted people consume more, escape more, think less critically, depend more heavily on convenience. And convenience often becomes invisible dependency. Food delivery, entertainment addiction, impulse purchases, endless scrolling. Emotional avoidance disguised as self-care. Now listen carefully. Rest is necessary. Peace is necessary. Recovery is necessary. But many modern habits are not recovery. They are sedation. There is a difference. Recovery restores clarity. Sedation numbs awareness. One strengthens you, the other disconnects you from yourself temporarily. And people who stay disconnected from themselves long enough eventually lose direction completely. That is why so many people feel emotionally lost despite being constantly busy. Their inner voice has been drowned by endless stimulation, no silence, no reflection, no emotional processing, just noise, noise all day, noise all night. Humans were not built for this level of continuous cognitive input. The brain never evolved for 24-hour digital bombardment. Every notification triggers micro-stress. Every comparison triggers emotional tension. Every negative headline activates survival responses. And after years of this, people become psychologically exhausted without understanding why. Then they blame themselves. I'm lazy. I'm weak. I've lost motivation. No, often they are overstimulated and emotionally depleted. There is a massive difference. A depleted nervous system struggles to create long-term vision because survival mode narrows thinking. This is why financial stress becomes so dangerous psychologically. When the brain constantly fears survival, creativity weakens, patience weakens, strategic thinking weakens. The mind becomes trapped in short-term reactions. Pay bills, survive the week, get through the month. And while survival matters, living permanently in survival mode slowly destroys imagination. That is tragic because imagination is where transformation begins. Every breakthrough starts internally before it appears externally. But exhausted minds rarely dream clearly. They become practical, predictable, emotionally cautious. Not because they lack intelligence, because chronic stress shrinks possibility. A stressed brain seeks safety first. That is why many people stop taking risks as they grow older, not because they become wiser, because exhaustion made them fearful. This is one reason hard work alone can keep people poor emotionally and financially. If all energy goes toward survival, nothing remains for creation. And creation is where leverage lives. Think about it carefully. The exhausted worker finishes the day mentally drained. The strategic builder protects energy intentionally. Completely different lifestyles. One constantly reacts. One deliberately designs. And design changes destiny. Modern people underestimate energy management massively. They think productivity is only about time. No, energy determines quality. 2 focused hours with clear energy can outperform 12 exhausted hours easily. That is why wealthy creators, founders, and thinkers often protect their mornings obsessively, not because they are lazy, because clarity is valuable. A clear mind sees opportunities, an exhausted mind completely misses. This is also why emotional health matters financially. An emotionally chaotic person struggles to build stable systems. Impulsive emotions create impulsive decisions, and impulsive decisions destroy long-term growth. One emotional purchase repeated weekly becomes years of financial leakage. One emotionally reactive decision can damage relationships, careers, and opportunities instantly. Emotional discipline is not merely personal development language. It is life infrastructure. A calm mind creates better outcomes, always, not instantly, consistently. That is why silence matters so much again. Silence allows nervous system recovery, not scrolling, not binge consumption, not endless stimulation. Real silence, walking without headphones, thinking without interruption, sitting without distraction, breathing without urgency, simple things. Yet modern people increasingly struggle to tolerate them because constant stimulation became emotional dependency, and dependency weakens internal power. This is why many people panic when external distractions disappear. Suddenly they must confront themselves, their fears, their exhaustion, their dissatisfaction, their loneliness, their unprocessed emotions. That confrontation feels unbearable initially, but it is also where healing begins. Because awareness precedes transformation. Always, you cannot change patterns you refuse to see. And exhaustion often hides patterns brilliantly. A person becomes so tired, they stop questioning life entirely. They simply continue surviving automatically. Wake up, push through, escape, repeat. That cycle is happening globally right now. Millions surviving routines they secretly resent, and society calls it normal adulthood. But deep down, many people feel something is wrong. They sense life should feel more alive than this, more meaningful, more intentional, more peaceful. And they are right. Human beings were not designed only to produce and consume endlessly. They were designed for connection, growth, purpose, creation, presence. Without those things, the soul becomes restless, and no amount of comfort fully fixes spiritual exhaustion. That is why some people take expensive vacations, yet return equally empty. The environment changed temporarily. The inner world did not. Real transformation is internal first. A person carrying chaos internally will recreate chaos externally eventually. That is why protecting mental space matters so deeply now, especially in 2025, because the battle for attention is intensifying. Artificial intelligence creates infinite content. Algorithms become more persuasive. Digital stimulation becomes more personalized, which means intentional living becomes more important than ever before. If you do not consciously direct your attention, someone else will profit from controlling it. That sentence may become one of the defining truths of modern life, because attention shapes identity. Whatever repeatedly enters the mind influences behavior eventually. Fearful content creates fearful thinking. Shallow content weakens focus. Negative environments drain ambition. Purposeful environments strengthen clarity. Your environment programs you silently. People underestimate this constantly. They say, "I'm just watching. I'm just scrolling. It's just entertainment." No. Everything repeated conditions the mind gradually. And conditioning creates identity over time. This is why protecting your environment matters more than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Environment reinforces patterns daily. A distracted environment creates distracted thinking. A peaceful environment creates clearer thinking, simple but powerful. That is why some of the most transformative decisions are not dramatic at all. Deleting unnecessary apps, protecting mornings, limiting negativity, creating routines, walking more, reading intentionally, learning focused skills, choosing calmer relationships, small shifts, massive long-term consequences. Because exhaustion is not cured through hype. It is cured through alignment. When actions align with deeper values, energy returns naturally. But when people live against themselves constantly, fatigue multiplies. A person trapped in meaningless work feels drained differently than a person building meaningful goals. Purpose changes energy, not because purpose removes difficulty, because meaningful struggle strengthens the spirit while meaningless struggle weakens it. That is why some people can work intensely for dreams without burning out, while others feel exhausted by ordinary routines. The soul knows the difference between aligned effort and empty survival. And eventually, everyone must confront that truth, because life moves quickly, faster every year. And one day, people wake up realizing exhaustion stole decades they can never recover. That realization breaks many people emotionally, but for some, it awakens them. It becomes the moment they finally say, I refuse to spend my entire existence emotionally drained. That decision matters, because reclaiming your energy changes everything afterward. And in Chapter 6, we are going to uncover one of the most uncomfortable truths in modern society. Why many people secretly fear freedom more than struggle? Because freedom demands responsibility, and responsibility terrifies the conditioned mind. Chapter 6, the fear of freedom. Most people say they want freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, emotional freedom, location freedom. But very few people are psychologically prepared for what freedom actually demands. Because freedom sounds beautiful in conversation, until responsibility arrives with it, then suddenly people want instructions again, approval again, structure again, permission again. The conditioned mind often fears freedom more than struggle because struggle is familiar, freedom is uncertain, and uncertainty terrifies people who were trained their entire lives to seek security externally. Think about it carefully. From childhood, most people were rewarded for compliance. Follow instructions. Stay inside the system. Do what is expected. Avoid mistakes. Do not stand out too much. Be realistic. The reward was safety. So naturally, many adults become emotionally dependent on external structure. A paycheck feels safer than possibility. Predictability feels safer than ownership. Familiar misery feels safer than uncertain growth, even when the current life is draining them completely. This is why some people sabotage opportunities unconsciously, not because they hate success, because success threatens the identity they built around survival. A person says they want freedom, then panics the moment life becomes unpredictable. An employee dreams of becoming independent, then becomes overwhelmed without someone telling them what to do daily. A creator wants visibility, then retreats after criticism appears. A person wants change, until change demands discomfort. That is the hidden psychological battle nobody talks about enough. Humans become attached to familiar emotional patterns even when those patterns hurt them. Why? Because familiarity creates perceived safety, and the nervous system prioritizes familiarity over potential. This explains why generational cycles repeat so often. Not because people consciously choose suffering, because breaking patterns requires psychological courage. A child raised around financial anxiety often unconsciously normalizes stress. A person raised around emotional chaos may mistake instability for passion. Someone raised to believe struggle equals worth may feel guilty when life becomes peaceful. These invisible beliefs shape adult behavior constantly, and unless they are questioned intentionally, they become destiny. That is why awareness matters more than motivation. Motivation creates temporary movement. Awareness changes identity, and identity shapes everything. A man works 70 hours weekly for years. He says he wants freedom, but secretly, he built his entire identity around being needed. Without work, he no longer knows who he is. So even when opportunities for change appear, he unconsciously resists them, because freedom would force him to confront himself beyond productivity. That is terrifying for many people. Modern culture tied human worth to output so aggressively that many individuals feel guilty resting, guilty slowing down, guilty being present, guilty existing without earning every moment. Think about how deeply conditioned that is. A human being begins believing their value depends entirely on productivity. That mindset creates endless exhaustion, because there is never enough achievement to satisfy someone disconnected from internal worth. Never. They keep chasing, keep proving, keep performing. And underneath all the ambition often lives one hidden fear. If I stop producing, do I still matter? That question quietly drives millions of people, not consciously, emotionally. This is why some wealthy people remain restless forever. They never built internal peace, only external achievement. And external achievement alone cannot calm an unhealed nervous system. A person who feels internally unsafe will continue chasing endlessly even after succeeding. More money, more status, more recognition, more validation. But peace never arrives, because peace is not purchased externally. It is developed internally. That realization changes everything, especially in modern society where image became currency. People perform success constantly now. Curated lifestyles, luxury signaling, productivity theater, fake certainty online. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, many are emotionally exhausted, financially fragile, and spiritually disconnected. The performance never stops, and performance drains life force. Authenticity restores it. This is why true freedom often looks quieter than people expect. Calm mornings, intentional work, clear priorities, healthy relationships, focused attention, emotional stability, not constant noise, not endless proving. Real freedom slows the nervous system, and many people have become so addicted to chaos they mistake calmness for boredom. That is important to understand. If someone grew up surrounded by emotional intensity, peace may initially feel uncomfortable. Stillness feels unfamiliar. Predictability feels strange. Healthy love feels suspicious. Humans normalize whatever they repeatedly experience, including dysfunction. This applies financially too. Some people unconsciously recreate struggle because struggle feels emotionally familiar. The nervous system knows how to survive stress. It does not know how to sustain peace. So the person overspends, self-sabotages, avoids opportunities, creates chaos unconsciously, then wonders why life never stabilizes. But stability requires emotional retraining. You must teach yourself that peace is safe, that rest is safe, that boundaries are safe, that calmness is not weakness, that freedom does not require guilt. This inner work matters deeply, because external success without emotional stability becomes fragile. One crisis collapses everything. Look at how many people appear successful externally while internally living in constant panic, afraid of losing status, afraid of slowing down, afraid of irrelevance, afraid of uncertainty. Fear-driven success eventually becomes emotional imprisonment. And prison with luxury is still prison. This is why freedom begins psychologically before financially. A person mentally dependent on approval remains trapped regardless of income. A person emotionally dependent on consumption remains trapped regardless of possessions. A person addicted to distraction remains trapped regardless of opportunity. Real freedom requires self-governance, the ability to direct your own mind consciously. That is rare. Most people are emotionally reactive. Their mood changes based on notifications, opinions, trends, external events, temporary outcomes. But emotionally grounded people operate differently. They observe before reacting, think long-term, protect peace intentionally, build slowly, move strategically, and over time, they create radically different lives, not because they are superhuman, because consistency guided by clarity becomes powerful, especially in chaotic times, and modern times are extremely chaotic psychologically. Attention wars, economic uncertainty, identity confusion, digital overstimulation. The world is becoming louder every year, which means internal clarity becomes more valuable every year. A calm, focused human being now possesses a massive advantage because calmness improves decision-making, and decisions shape destiny. Most lives are not ruined instantly. They are shaped slowly through repeated emotional decisions, impulsive spending, toxic relationships, chronic distraction, avoidance, fear-based choices. Likewise, strong lives are built slowly too. Focused mornings, intentional habits, skill development, emotional discipline, long-term thinking, tiny decisions, repeated consistently. Massive consequences over time. This is why freedom cannot merely be wished for. It must be practiced daily, in thought, in behavior, in priorities. Freedom is not an event. It is a way of operating. A disciplined mind experiences freedom differently than a chaotic mind. One controls impulses, the other obeys them. One builds intentionally, the other reacts emotionally. One creates peace internally, the other seeks endless external stimulation, and eventually, their lives reflect those internal states clearly. A person who masters themselves gains an advantage no economy can fully take away, because external conditions always fluctuate. Markets change, technology evolves, industries collapse, but emotional discipline remains valuable everywhere. A clear mind adapts faster, learns faster, recovers faster. This is why inner stability matters more now than ever before, especially as artificial intelligence reshapes work itself. Many traditional paths are changing rapidly. Predictability is disappearing, which means people emotionally dependent on certainty may struggle deeply in coming years. Meanwhile, adaptable thinkers will evolve, not because they know everything, because they remain psychologically flexible. Flexibility matters more than rigid identity now. The person who says, "This is the only way life works," often suffers most when reality changes. But the person willing to learn, adapt, rebuild, and rethink continuously stays alive mentally. That mindset creates resilience. And resilience creates opportunity, not instantly, repeatedly. The future belongs less to the strongest and more to the most adaptable emotionally. That is the truth many people resist, because adaptation requires humility. The humility to admit what worked before may not work forever. And ego hates that sentence. Ego clings to old identities, old systems, old comfort zones, but growth requires releasing outdated versions of yourself repeatedly. That process never fully ends, which is why true freedom is dynamic, not static. You continuously evolve or slowly stagnate. There is no neutral. And deep down, many people already feel this tension inside themselves. A quiet awareness that they can no longer continue living unconsciously forever. That something must change, not just externally, internally. Because no amount of money compensates for a disconnected life, and no amount of productivity replaces peace. That realization marks the beginning of awakening, and in Chapter 7, we are going to expose one of the most dangerous lies modern culture ever sold to ambitious people. The lie that burnout is a badge of honor. Because burnout is not proof of greatness. Often, it is proof of imbalance. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 7, The Burnout Illusion. There are people collapsing emotionally in expensive apartments while the world congratulates them for being successful. Think about how disturbing that is. A person can be praised publicly while privately breaking apart psychologically. And modern culture often rewards that exact pattern. Keep grinding. No sleep. Outwork everyone. Push harder. Sacrifice now. Live later. But later is never guaranteed, and a life built entirely around exhaustion eventually collects a brutal price. Burnout is not ambition. Burnout is what happens when ambition loses alignment with humanity. That distinction matters deeply, because somewhere along the line, people started romanticizing self-destruction. They began treating depletion like proof of commitment. But exhaustion is not always evidence of purpose. Sometimes it is evidence of imbalance. A man builds a company successfully, but loses his marriage. A woman climbs professionally, while secretly battling anxiety attacks nightly. A creator gains millions of views, yet feels emotionally empty when the camera turns off. From the outside, society calls it success. Inside, the nervous system is collapsing. This is happening everywhere. And the dangerous part is that burnout often arrives disguised as achievement. More money, more status, more recognition, more responsibility. Meanwhile, the soul quietly whispers, "I cannot sustain this." But many people ignore that voice for years. Why? Because external validation is addictive. Applause feels powerful temporarily. Recognition feels meaningful temporarily. But temporary validation cannot replace internal balance long-term. Never. That is why some people reach goals they dreamed about for years, only to feel strangely empty afterward. The achievement happened. The fulfillment did not. Because fulfillment does not come merely from reaching targets. It comes from alignment between external success and internal peace. Without that alignment, even victories feel hollow eventually. This is one reason hard work alone can keep people emotionally poor. If a person sacrifices health, relationships, identity, and peace-chasing external success, what exactly are they becoming wealthy in? Certainly not life. Real wealth includes energy, presence, mental clarity, freedom of attention, strong relationships, purposeful living. Without those things, success becomes performance, and performance becomes exhausting. A person constantly proving themselves never truly rests psychologically. Even during vacations, even during weekends, Even during achievements, their nervous system remains in survival mode, always chasing, always comparing, always afraid of losing momentum. That fear-driven existence slowly drains the spirit, because fear is expensive energy. And modern culture monetizes fear aggressively. Fear of falling behind, fear of irrelevance, fear of missing out, fear of not being enough. These fears silently drive consumption and overwork worldwide. People exhaust themselves trying to outrun insecurities that no amount of achievement fully resolves. Why? Because internal wounds cannot be healed externally forever. A person who feels unworthy internally will continue searching endlessly for proof externally. More income, more followers, more titles, more possessions. But insecurity adapts quickly. The mind immediately creates another mountain, another comparison, another target, another reason to feel behind. That cycle never ends until awareness interrupts it. This is why emotional intelligence matters more than raw ambition. Ambition without self-awareness often becomes self-destruction wearing expensive clothes. Read that again mentally. Self-destruction wearing expensive clothes. Many people are not building lives. They are building sophisticated distractions from themselves. Work becomes avoidance. Busyness becomes escape. Achievement becomes identity. And identity built entirely around performance becomes fragile. Because what happens when performance stops? Who are you without productivity? Who are you without applause? Who are you when the room becomes quiet? Those questions terrify many high achievers because they spent years developing external competence while neglecting internal connection. That imbalance creates hidden emptiness, and emptiness eventually reveals itself through burnout, anxiety, numbness, or emotional collapse. The body always speaks eventually, always, through fatigue, insomnia, irritability, loss of motivation, chronic stress, emotional shutdown. The body keeps score of unresolved imbalance. Modern society often ignores these signals until crisis arrives. A panic attack, a breakdown, a divorce, a health scare, a moment staring at the ceiling realizing, I built a life I cannot emotionally survive. That realization changes people forever because burnout forces questions ambition avoided. Questions like, what am I actually chasing? Who taught me this pace? Why do I feel guilty resting? Why am I terrified of slowing down? What would happen if I stopped performing? These questions matter deeply because many people inherited survival mindsets from generations who never had the luxury to reflect emotionally. Parents taught sacrifice because survival required it. Grandparents taught hard work because opportunity was limited. Entire generations equated struggle with virtue, and their sacrifices deserve respect. But modern reality changed. Technology changed, economics changed, attention changed, opportunity changed, yet psychologically, many people still operate from outdated survival scripts. Work harder, push more, ignore feelings, keep moving. But emotional suppression is not strength. Real strength includes awareness, the ability to recognize when effort becomes self-destruction. A person endlessly sprinting without recovery eventually collapses. Athletes understand this physically. Modern workers rarely understand it mentally. Recovery is productive. Reflection is productive. Peace is productive. Clarity multiplies quality. An exhausted brain produces worse decisions than a rested, focused one. That alone should transform how people think about work. But many systems benefit from exhaustion. Exhausted people consume more, question less, accept more. depend more. A calm, clear-thinking individual becomes harder to manipulate. That is why protecting your nervous system is revolutionary now, especially in a world engineered to overstimulate you constantly. This does not mean avoiding hard work. It means redefining what intelligent effort actually looks like. Intelligent effort includes recovery, boundaries, focus, intentional living, strategic thinking, long-term sustainability, because success that destroys your health is failure delayed. Success that costs your soul is failure disguised. And no amount of money repairs years of neglected existence easily. Talk to older people quietly sometime, not publicly, not performatively. Listen carefully to what many regret. Rarely, I wish I spent more time answering emails. More often, I wish I was more present. I wish I slowed down. I wish I lived more authentically. I wish I had more courage. I wish I spent more time with people I loved. Those regrets matter because time compounds invisibly. People assume they have endless years until suddenly they realize life moved frighteningly fast. One day becomes one decade almost overnight, especially when living unconsciously. That is why intentional living matters so much. A person fully present experiences life differently than a person trapped in endless mental noise. Presence stretches time psychologically. Distraction compresses it. Think about childhood. Days felt longer. Moments felt deeper. Why? Presence. Children experience reality directly. Adults often experience life through mental pressure and constant distraction. Always thinking ahead, always worrying, always somewhere else mentally. That disconnect steals life quietly, and burnout accelerates it because exhausted people stop noticing beauty entirely. Sunsets become background noise. Conversations become obligations. Weekends become recovery periods instead of lived experiences. Life becomes maintenance. That is not living. That is surviving efficiently. There is more to existence than productivity. And deep down, every human being knows this intuitively. That is why moments of real peace feel almost sacred now. A slow morning, a meaningful conversation, silence without anxiety, walking without urgency, laughing genuinely, feeling fully alive in the present moment. Those moments remind people what life actually is beneath all the noise. Not endless performance, presence, connection, meaning. And ironically, people often become more effective externally once they stop living in constant burnout internally. Because clarity improves performance naturally. A regulated nervous system creates better decisions, better relationships, better creativity, better consistency. Chaos weakens all of those things eventually. This is why emotional regulation may become one of the most valuable skills of the future. Not merely intelligence, regulation, the ability to remain calm while the world becomes increasingly chaotic. Because chaos is profitable, fear is profitable, outrage is profitable. Peaceful people are difficult to control. And emotionally grounded people become powerful builders over time. Not through frantic effort, through consistent intentional action. That is the key. Consistency beats emotional intensity long term, always. A person who works sustainably for 10 years quietly outpaces the person constantly sprinting toward collapse. Because longevity compounds. And compounding shapes everything. Health compounds. Skills compound. Relationships compound. Habits compound. Peace compounds. Likewise, stress compounds. Neglect compounds. Distraction compounds. Every day you are building something internally. The question is, What exactly are you building? A life, or merely a survival machine? That question becomes impossible to ignore once awareness awakens fully. And in Chapter 8, we are going to uncover why modern people often confuse consumption with success. Because many individuals are not becoming wealthier, they are becoming more expensive prisoners. Chapter 8, The Consumption Trap. There are people earning more money than their parents ever imagined, yet somehow feeling poorer emotionally every single year. Not because they lack income, because modern society taught them to consume like kings while living like prisoners. That is one of the darkest illusions of modern life. People think increasing income automatically creates freedom. But income without control often creates upgraded dependency instead. A bigger apartment, a more expensive car, more subscriptions, more debt, more pressure, more anxiety disguised as lifestyle, and suddenly the person earning twice as much feels just as trapped as before. Only now the prison looks luxurious. This is the consumption trap. And millions are living inside it without realizing. Modern culture constantly whispers the same message. Buy this and you'll feel successful. Own this and you'll feel respected. Upgrade this and you'll feel valuable. But external upgrades cannot permanently repair internal emptiness. Never. Temporary excitement, yes. Lasting fulfillment, rarely. Because the emotional system adapts quickly. Humans normalize new comfort levels almost immediately. The new phone becomes ordinary. The new car becomes expected. The new salary becomes insufficient. Then the chase begins again. More, more, more. But endless consumption without internal clarity creates emotional starvation. A person spends money trying to purchase feelings, status, security, worth, validation, belonging. And corporations understand this psychology extremely well. That is why advertising rarely sells products directly anymore. It sells identity, freedom, luxury, confidence, attractiveness, importance. People are not merely buying objects, they are buying. Sense old promises weakening, sense the pressure increasing. That awareness creates fear in some people, but for others, it creates awakening, an understanding that survival alone is no longer enough. That intentional creation must replace unconscious repetition. And once someone fully understands leverage psychologically, their relationship with effort transforms forever. They no longer seek merely to work hard. They seek to work meaningfully, strategically, sustainably, because sustainable effort compounds. Desperate effort collapses, and collapse helps nobody. Not families, not dreams, not futures. This is why intelligent builders prioritize energy, clarity, and systems together, not endless burnout. Because a calm, focused builder can create exponentially more over 10 years than an exhausted, reactive person constantly sprinting emotionally. Longevity wins. Always.